"You don't know what they did to your parents," my grandmother whispered, "but promise me you'll make them pay." The moment that changed, in everything I was 17 when she said that. Her hands trembled like leaves in the wind, her eyes already fading to that distant place where the dying go before they depart. The only person who raised me, the woman who took me in when I was 3 years old, after the car accident that killed my parents, was slipping away from me. The hospital smelled of disinfectant and despair. The machines beeped in a rhythm that seemed to count the remaining seconds of her life. I held her hand, so thin it seemed it would break if I squeezed too hard, and whispered back, "I swear, Grandma, I'll find out what really happened, and I'll make them pay, even if it costs me everything." She smiled then, the first real smile I'd seen in years. And in that moment, I felt something dark and cold settling in my chest, something that would consume me for the next years of my life. That was the moment everything in my life changed. When I was 3 years old, my parents died in a car accident. Or at least that's what everyone said. No one talked about the details. It was a tragedy. These things happen. At least you survived. I was raised by my grandmother, a quiet woman with tired eyes and a locked box she never opened. For years, I thought we were just unlucky. That life had been cruel to us for no reason. But then, when I was 15 years old, I heard her whisper once, thinking I was asleep. They murdered them, made it look like an accident. That was the first time I felt the ice of revenge before I even understood what it meant. I pretended not to hear, but those words were etched in my mind like a burning tattoo. For the next 2 years, I watched my grandmother wither. It wasn't just age, it was the weight of a secret she carried. Sometimes I'd catch her looking out the window, as if expecting someone to come. Other times, she'd wake up screaming in the middle of the night. And then, that night in the hospital, when she knew she was dying, she finally told me the truth she had kept for 14 years. After the funeral, I was devastated, not just by the loss, but by the rage. How could she keep this from me for so long? How could she let me live a lie? That's when I found it. Hidden in the attic, behind dusty old photos, inside a shoebox that smelled of mothballs and secrets. A letter yellowed with time, folded and refolded, signed with a shaky handwriting. "If you are reading this, it means I'm gone, but you deserve the truth. Your parents did not die. They were silenced." My hands trembled so much I almost tore the paper. But I continued reading. "Your mother called me that night. She was scared, said your father had discovered something big enough to bring down powerful people. They were going to flee with you the next day, but they did not get a chance. The accident was planned. I know because they came after me. Told me to keep quiet or you would be next. So I kept the secret. Kept you. But now you need to know." Attached was a list of names. 3 of them were local. One was a judge, another a politician. The third, my high school principal. And next to each name, in red ink, "They know." I sat on the floor of that dusty attic and cried like I had not cried since I was a child. But these were not tears of sadness. They were tears of pure rage. I started investigating, at first small things. Old articles from 1999, corruption scandals, hush money payments. I learned to use the internet like a detective. I spent entire nights in libraries, reading old newspapers until my eyes burned. But then I found the autopsy report. It was filed incorrectly under the wrong name, almost as if someone wanted it lost. But I found it. Blunt force trauma to the head, not consistent with a car accident. Burns added later. My parents were already dead before the fire. I couldn't breathe. The paper fell from my hands and I vomited right there in the public library bathroom. In that moment, I knew one thing with absolute certainty. Someone had killed my parents, and I was going to find out who. I changed. From a sad, withdrawn teenager, I became something different. I smiled more. I made friends. I became the girl everyone underestimated, sweet, naive, harmless. But behind that mask, I was collecting secrets. One by one, I started to approach the names on the list. The judge had a son in my school. I started dating him, not for love, for access. I spent afternoons at their house, listening to conversations, rummaging through drawers when no one was looking. The politician frequented the coffee shop where I got a part-time job. I served his coffee and listened to his phone calls. And the principal? Well, he already knew me. The poor orphan he cared for since childhood. How ironic. Some denied when I finally confronted them. Subtly, of course. Some laughed, as if it were a teenage joke. But one cried. It was the judge's son. When I showed him the evidence I had collected, he crumbled. He told me about the whistleblower, my father. How he was about to expose something enormous. How the accident was planned in meetings his own father participated in. And how my grandmother was warned to keep quiet or lose me too. They know who you are. Stay away, or end up like them. My father had uncovered a money laundering operation linked to the mayor, the school board, and a federal grant program. Millions of dollars being siphoned off through fake contracts and phantom organizations. He thought he could report it. That justice would prevail. He never had the chance. And my mother? She tried to flee with me when she realized the danger. They forced the accident on the road that led out of town. The same place where, ironically, I learned to drive years later. I should never have survived. The car caught fire, but someone pulled me out before. A man who was never seen again. My grandmother always said it was a miracle, but now I knew the truth. Someone had pity on a 3-year-old child and risked everything to save me. I was not just carrying revenge. I was carrying a miracle that cost an anonymous hero his life. At 18 years old, I started leaking what I had found, anonymously, of course. Old photos, documents, connections, everything carefully planned to cause the maximum impact. I created fake social media profiles. I sent tips to journalists. I left evidence where curious people could find it. The whispers became headlines. People got scared. They started asking questions. That's when I received the first threat, an unmarked envelope in my mailbox. We know who you are. Stay away, or end up like them. Inside, there was a photo of me leaving school and a photo of my parents in their coffin. In that moment, I knew I was getting close, and I didn't care what it would cost me. The threats increased. My car was vandalized. My house was broken into. Nothing was stolen, but they made it clear they had been there. Then I changed strategy. Instead of hiding, I became more visible. I got an interview with the local newspaper as the orphan who overcame tragedy. I talked about how I wanted to honor my parents' memory by doing investigative journalism. They thought I was just a naive girl wanting to make a difference. They didn't know that every word was calculated. I started university studying journalism. My professors adored me. I was dedicated, passionate about the truth, always asking the right questions. What they didn't know is that I was using every class, every contact, every university resource to build my case against my parents' killers. At 20 years old, I had no true friends left. I had pushed everyone away. Every relationship was transactional. What could this person give me? How could they help me on my mission? Revenge had become the only thing I lived for. I woke up thinking about it. I fell asleep dreaming about it. When I looked in the mirror, I saw the same heavy eyes my grandmother had. I wasn't just hunting them, I was becoming the woman that pain built. That's when I met Marcus. He was in my journalism ethics class, and unlike the others, he saw me, truly saw me. Not the mask I wore, but the broken person behind it. "You are killing yourself inside," he told me one night, after I had skipped another date to investigate a lead. "You don't understand," I replied. "I have to do this. I promised." "To whom did you promise? To your dead grandmother or to your own rage?" That question haunted me for weeks. At 21 years old, I had enough evidence to bring them all down. Documents, recordings, witnesses. I had built a case that even the best lawyer could not refute. But I wanted more than legal justice. I wanted them to suffer as I had suffered. I wanted the whole world to know what kind of monsters they were. So I organized a public exposure. I invited the press to a conference on local corruption. I said I had an important story to tell. They came expecting another typical college student story. What they got was a journalistic bombshell. I presented everything, every document, every recording, every connection. I showed how my parents were murdered for trying to expose the truth, how the investigation was covered up, how all of them conspired to cover up their crimes. The cameras were rolling when I confronted the last name on the list, my former high school principal. He crumbled, confessed everything right there, live, and the world saw what they did. I kept my promise, but I paid the price. The explosion was immediate. Within hours, my exposure was all over social media. Justice for the Smiths became a trending topic. Journalists from all over the country called wanting interviews. All 3 men on the list were arrested. The investigations expanded, revealing an even larger network of corruption than I had imagined. Dozens of people were indicted. Finally, justice. But it did not feel like victory. It felt empty. For years, revenge had been my compass, my reason for existing, and now that it was done, I felt lost. Who was I without my mission? What was left of me besides anger? I went to my grandmother's grave the day the last of the murderers was convicted. I knelt on the grass and whispered, I did it. I kept my promise, but I was trembling, not from cold, but from something deeper, a terrifying realization that I was just beginning to grasp. The truth is that revenge did not bring peace. It brought scars and silence. It did not kill them. It killed me, slowly. What I really wanted all along was to heal. I wanted my parents back. I wanted a family. I wanted to be able to trust people without wondering what their hidden motives were. I wanted to love without calculating. But revenge had poisoned all of that. The following years were the hardest of my life. Not because I was being persecuted or threatened, the culprits were in prison, but because I had to learn to live without anger. I did therapy, a lot of therapy. I learned that trauma does not justify becoming a person you do not recognize, that justice and revenge are not the same thing, even when the outcome seems identical. Marcus stayed with me through it all. He saw me at my worst, when I yelled at him for trying to help me, when I sabotaged our relationship because I did not believe I deserved love, when I woke up in the middle of the night with nightmares. Why do you stay? I asked once. Because I see who you really are beneath all that pain, he replied, and she's worth fighting for. At 25 years old, I started speaking to support groups, not about revenge or justice, but about loss, about how anger can consume you if you let it, about how it's possible to seek the truth without losing your soul in the process. I met other people who had lost loved ones to violent crimes. I saw the same thirst for revenge in their eyes that I used to see in the mirror, and I told them, make them face justice, but do not carry their poison in your chest. Let it go before it devours you. Some listened to me, others did not. I understood. I had been in their place. Marcus asked me to marry him when I was 27 years old. I said no, not because I did not love him, but because I was afraid. Afraid that my darkness would contaminate him, afraid that I would not know how to love without suspicion, afraid that he would realize I was irreparably broken. You are not broken, he told me. You are incorrectly healed. But bones that heal incorrectly can be broken again and reconfigured the right way. It took another year for me to understand what he meant and another 6 months for me to say yes. Our wedding was small, simple, but it was the first time in years that I felt pure joy, not triumph, not satisfaction, but joy. Today I am 30 years old. Marcus and I have a 2-year-old daughter, Emma. Sometimes she does something that reminds me of my parents, even though she never knew them. A smile, a gesture, the way she tilts her head when she's curious. And I realize that they live through her, through me, not in the form of anger or a thirst for revenge, but in love and hope. I still speak to support groups. I still tell my story, but now I end it differently. I kept my word, but I paid the price. And if I could talk to that 17-year-old girl again, holding her grandmother's hand, I would say, you were brave, but dear, you didn't have to carry this alone. My biggest lesson from this was that revenge is seductive. It whispers that you are doing the right thing, that you are honoring those you lost, that you are being strong. But revenge lies. True strength, is in choosing to heal instead of hurt, in choosing to build instead of destroy, in choosing love instead of hate. My parents would not want me to spend 27 years of my life consumed by anger. They wanted me to live, that I love, that I be happy. And finally, I am. Justice was served, the culprits paid, but the true triumph was not their downfall. It was my resurrection. If this story touched you, share it. Someone you know may need to hear that it is possible to choose healing instead of revenge, that it is possible to find peace without losing your humanity. And if you are carrying your own anger, your own desire for revenge, remember, you do not have to carry this alone.